Hi, I'm Femi OK. Welcome to the bonus edition of The Stream. And now you get to watch The Stream every day of the week. Hashtag, you're welcome. So what do I have for you today? Coming up, the captain of the refugee Paralympic team takes us on a journey from being a baby born in Afghanistan without arms, a refugee who fled his country, to training for the Tokyo Paralympic Games. The Stream checks in on the battle of wills playing out between demonstrators and Colombia's government. Three guests bring us three memorable stories that capture the protesters' demands. Let's start in Canada, where the recent discovery of mass grave sites of Indigenous children has been a horrific reminder of former racist government policies. Between 1890 and the late 1990s, more than 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to live in residential schools. The aim was to extinguish their culture and assimilate the children into Canadian society. Guests Brandy Moran, Charlie Angus and Tanya Dick have spent years trying to get justice for the survivors and their families. The live broadcast was emotional, and we continue the painful conversation after the show. Tanya picks up here, explaining how the residential school system impacted not just her parents who were taken away, but every generation that followed.
Yeah, just really kind of realizing it as I was in my younger adult life and going into my adult life, that, my parents grew up in this system that was violent and abusive and really beat their spirits down and their bodies down, and they weren't given the opportunity to be properly groomed to be mothers and fathers, and they weren't given the opportunity and space to be properly groomed to fulfill their cultural, traditional responsibilities and roles within our community and our traditional ways of being. So they lost so much in that. And when I was hearing my uncle talk, and he's a residential school survivor too, he was like, all I wanted in that moment of fear was to feel my mother's arms around me. And I just started crying because I remember so much of my time just wanting my mother's arms around me, because she couldn't even be the mother she probably wanted to be because of her lived experiences and what she knew from 5 years old on, and didn't know how to parent, didn't know how to nurture. She only knew how to survive. She only knew how to survive, and that was her main focus. And then when she had us as children, really struggled with that. And she really externally put all of her energies into changing the world, became educated, became a nurse as well, and a strong, wicked activist for Indigenous rights and Indigenous peoples, particularly around health. So I feel like I didn't have a mother because of the experience. And then there's a whole bunch of other systems and things that come with that package for myself as an individual, and not having that, I don't know my language. I wasn't groomed and brought up properly, that I have to reclaim and revitalize or relearn. And that in itself is, huge.
And also the point that somebody did this deliberately, it was a strategy, it was a policy. They didn't want you to know your language, they didn't want you to be hugged by your mum, they didn't want any of that. They wanted to take the Indigenous person out of you.
Yeah.
What I find remarkable is that Canada was going towards a direction where they had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. They knew about these horrible stories. They knew that there would be graves. There was a list of recommendations, almost 100 recommendations. And I have to share this with you because it made me feel so sad. This was testimony from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and the survivor is apologizing. Have a look, have a listen.
Before anything happened to me, I want to apologize to my family for what I put them through. I could tell my grandchildren, I could tell my great-grandchildren that I love them. But with my own children, I can't. It hurts. It hurts me to think about what I missed.
Like we're all crying, right? What the what? How do you... Where is the justice, Tanya? How do you get justice?
I think my parents both, we've had this conversation, and they both have said that they will never get justice for what they've experienced in their lifetime. They hope in the generations to follow that we can find our way back to our kind of traditional ways of being and our traditional knowledge and our own traditional governance systems, which we struggle with and strive for. We have generations, after me who are so keen and just kind of radical in many ways that make my hope cup feel full. But I think it came down to land and resources in the beginning, and I think that needs to be a part of the discussion as well. I think with the forensic audits and everything else, like what churches were given lands on our territories. Like there's a whole plot of land in the Numgees territory that belonged to the Anglican Church, and why and how did that happen, and why is it not coming back to us? Was it a part of the agreement to build that residential school on the land and that they could look after it? If you do this for us, we'll give you this. Like, I don't know. That's the kind of stuff that I need to know and want to know. And back to the lands and resources again. We are underfunded. I think Charlie talked a lot about it today. And when we talked about Canadians today, this isn't that historical. It is happening today, every day in our lives. Our education system on reserves continue to be underfunded. Our children continue to be removed and into children and family services. Our health systems are underfunded. Our nursing stations are underfunded. We're not, there's no parity there with general society. And of course that reflects on the disparity of quality of life and overall health status of Indigenous people in this country.
Can I just say, yeah, like the underfunding and the inequality and the oppression across the board. When you asked the question to Charlie earlier from a viewer about, how are Canadians to blame for this? Well, I'd just like to say that Canadians benefit off of the richness of the resources of the First Peoples of this land. So since this so-called Canada was established, Canadians have, become, wealthy and have these high standards of living. Meanwhile, the First Peoples of these lands live in poverty. Like you see it everywhere. Like I live next to some First Nations communities reserves, and it's total segregation. And the community where I live in town is like full of millionaires and prosperous.
Absolutely.
And you go just a few miles down the road, and the poverty there is just stunning. We're talking third world living conditions in these communities. And the average Canadian, if they understood that their tax-paying dollars are supporting, governments and institutions and, corporations that continue to exploit the lands and resources of the Indigenous peoples, while the Indigenous peoples are reaping very, very little of those benefits. That's how you contribute to this ongoing crisis.
Let me show you one more thing, Charlie. I'm going to share this with you if you don't mind. This is from Justin Trudeau from this week, okay, from the last 24 hours. He posted this. He went to see one of the mass unmarked graves, and he says, "It's hard to find words that are enough, but to all those affected, know that I am here as your partner to walk the path of reconciliation and right these historical wrongs." And yet, the Canadian government are in court right now, pushing back on some of the recommendations that were made at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. These two things do not go together, Charlie. What am I missing?
Canadians are really good at symbols, and this Prime Minister is the king of symbols. So he talks about historic wrongs. He refuses to admit the ongoing wrongs, as has been really clearly articulated. Parliament, just a few weeks ago, ordered the Prime Minister to end his court battles against Indigenous children. And within 5 days, he was back in court fighting against this generation of children. And to understand how all this is connected, if you take, in my region, we've had some of the most frightening suicide crisis among young people. So we have some of the highest suicide rates in the world. You put any community where you've had a huge, shocking number of youth suicides today, and you put the names of perpetrators from the residential schools, and they will follow on these black X's from community to community to community. Where the perpetrators of the abuse were, the intergenerational traumas today. And as for resources, they built a massive diamond mine in my region where there were no roads. And when they found diamonds, they were flying in from London, they were flying in from South Africa. They built a world-class mining operation to get those diamonds out. And just down the road in Little Attawapiskat, it's like Haiti at minus 40. And we had little Cree youth leaders like Shannon Kustashin threatening to go to the United Nations to get a school built. They couldn't figure out how to build a school for these children. And this is the Canadian issue. Canada will never be the nation that we could be until we realize that it's not the oil, it's not the diamonds, it's not the copper that makes our land and our resources rich. The resources that we have is this young generation of Indigenous children. When you see them and you see that spark in their eyes, but as Cindy Blackstock, she's like the Martin Luther King of this generation, she says, children only have one childhood, and once it's gone, it never comes back. We have to protect that childhood now. So the Prime Minister, no more symbols, no more teddy bears, Justin. Stop fighting in court. Commit to clean water. Muscandaga, 26 years. Children have grown up and are having their own children without clean water in the country with the richest water resources on the planet. You do that, and people will take it seriously.
Can I just add one quick thing?
Do you know what? I'm going to end with Cindy Blackstock because we are actually in danger of doing an entire new TV show, which is longer than the live show. So allow me to wrap it up. But Tanya and Charlie and then Brandy, you are now firm friends of the stream. You have an open invitation to come back anytime. Let's end with Cindy Blackstock. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Miigwech.
Willful and reckless discrimination in a worst-case scenario, causing the unnecessary family separations for First Nations, harms to children, and sadly the deaths of some children. This isn't a quote from 100 years ago. This is from a 2019 legal decision against the Canadian government. The Canadian government provides unequal federal public services for First Nations people, and that makes it far harder to recover from the trauma of residential schools. This generation of First Nations kids goes into foster care at 14 times the rate of other kids. More kids in state cares than a residential school. Let's make sure this generation doesn't have to recover from their childhoods.
So that gives you some insight into what Canadians are talking about right now regarding their residential schools and their legacy. You can watch the full stream episode at stream.aljazeera.com. It has been a while since protests in Colombia have made international news headlines. Demonstrations began at the end of April in response to the government's plan to raise taxes. The tax plan was quickly dropped, but protesters didn't go home. Instead, they expanded their list of demands to include major social reforms too. During the live show, the guests and I discussed some of the key demands and the government's response to them. After the broadcast, I asked the guests to share one surprising story about the current protests in Colombia.
I think I would definitely have to start with Portal Resistencia, which is a protest site here located in Bogota. It's a place where youth, mostly youth, have organized and come together to create a space for dialogue, to create a space for community, for democracy. And what really struck me were some of the democratic assemblies that they've organized there. What they ended up doing was inviting the community to come together to decide on what would be their demands that would represent their community located in Kennedy, which is located somewhat on the peripheries of Bogota. And what was really impressive to me is that not only they came up with a list of demands, but they also came up with a referendum that they financed and that 3,000 people in their community participated in, which is something that I had not really seen before, and that was completely organized by protesters who are mostly between the ages of 20 and 26 years old.
Nathalie.
It's a date in Puerto Resistencia, which is one of the points of resistance in Cali, where different backgrounds in the city came together. And we had some Black people, we had some indigenous people, La Minga, and then we had mixed people, mestizos, and then we had the professor from the academies, and then we had all the street vendors, and they were joining forces and singing to each other and sharing different things in the same space. And they, from that point, they started to build different things. There are no things that are only happening as of right now in Cali. They came from process that have been in this place for decades, and now they just estranging each other, you know? And there's are things that are not only here because of the strike and just responding to the strike. It's just things that we know that we're building for the city, because we know that our governments are really corrupted. So we know that we need to start forming in informal education people that can be part of the political things, but also leaders in their neighbors and leaders in their communities.
Elizabeth.
The story that I briefly want to share is from a place called Guaviare in the south of Colombia. Again, this protest movement has not only been urban, but also very much a rural phenomenon as well. And in that city, in San Jose del Guaviare, which is the largest sort of small town in a rural area, different farmers, smallhold farmers, we call them here campesinos, came from many different regions and joined the protest in this one place. So it was almost this coming together, this solidarity moment in which everyone sort of just put their stories out on the table, and many of them there for the very first time. What really struck me about that is that one of the most significant groups among the protesters there was a group of ex-combatants from the FARC who had demobilized with the peace process and who wanted to sort of show that they were now committed to a peaceful change for their country. So for many years, of course, we're fighting in a guerrilla movement, but now wanted to show very much that it was a peaceful demonstration that was going to change the political future of the country. And to see them demonstrating side by side with the community was extremely powerful and shows the promise of the way forward if the peace accord really can take its hold and be fully implemented.
Wow. That's extraordinary. I'm just wondering, Nathalie, just the last thought I had, is there a protest song that rings around Cali that everybody sings, or a chant that everybody has that brings everybody together? Is there something there that you want to share with us?
I'm trying to think one that it doesn't highlight this awful person that we all the Colombians are thinking right now. But I think one that is really, really amazing is one that says, amigo, capucho, todos estamos contigo, something like that. Like, gracias, amigo capucho. And they all, we all chant that thing, and they all bring us together. And also the anthem of the indigenous guard, la Guardia Indígena. When that starts to play and everybody starts to say, Guardia, Guardia, Fuerza, Fuerza, it brings everyone together here in our city.
Finally, I want to show you a video that I cannot stop watching. Abbas Karimi is an athlete, a refugee from Afghanistan who was born without arms and a very fast swimmer. Have a look.
Karimi, the independent participant there.
So that was Abbas racing at the 2019 World Para Swimming Championships. He's now in training for the Tokyo Paralympics coming up in August. Abbas is one of 6 athletes in the refugee Paralympic team. He took time out from his training schedule to talk to me about swimming and the journey that's taken him from being a bullied teenager all the way to the Summer Paralympic Games.
We should fight for our dreams and for our goals to be something in this world. And that's what it's all about.
People will notice that it's the ajstream and at Refugees, which is the UNHCR, which is the UN Refugee Agency. We are collaborating, and you are coming to us via their Instagram handle. And that's important because I see you regularly saying, I am representing 18 million refugees. That is a lot on your very strong shoulders that you are bringing with you. Why do you say that? Why is that important?
Because, you know, I'm a refugee, and I've been a refugee for many years. When I represent 80 million displaced people and millions of refugees in the world, you know, it means I'm representing my life and what I've been through, my story, and millions of refugees and millions of displaced people who's been through the same journey that I've been through. And, you know, so we just want to show the world and that, you know, we want to fit in a society and make the society and the world a better place.
Emily wants to know, are you competing at the Tokyo Olympics?
Yes, I'm competing at the Tokyo Paralympic Games, and I'm very excited to represent 80 million displaced people and millions of refugees in the world.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just you on the team. You have 5 other teammates. Have you met each other? I know I've seen you on Zoom together, but have you actually been together yet as a team?
The only athlete who is in the refugee Paralympic team, and he's a swimmer, Ibrahim. I met him in person, yeah. And we've been together for 2-time World Para Swimming Championships. And the rest, I talked with one of them, but I haven't met them in person. So very excited.
It's going to be so exciting. So it's part of the refugee Paralympic team. There are 6 teammates. You had to qualify, and you are captain of that team. How are you going to lead your teammates?
You know, to be a good representative, you know, and for me, I'm focused on myself, and of course, at the same time, when we're teammates, you know, we support each other, we cheer for each other. And then when the time comes in my race, my responsibility is to be focused on myself and do the best performance of my life that I never had done before. So that's what it's all about. You know, I focus on my own lane, on myself, and give everything I got. And I believe that I'm going to win. But, you know, anything can happen. But my goal is, my mindset, my belief system is, you know, to just focus on myself and give everything I got. Everything I've done in the training will show up in my competition.
If you had to tell your younger self one thing, what would that one thing be?
I want the youngsters to know that, you know, life means something with purpose. You know, find your purpose, find yourself. Don't chase people, you know, spend time on yourself, that who you are, you know, what you can be in order being a human, you know, what you can be more out of that, you know, and that thing should be positive. And, you know, always choose the hard path and leave the easy things for someone else. And the hard path, the hard goals, you know, set high goals, those things will make you a better person. Those things will put you to the next level. And that's the only thing that I'm, you know, I have to tell them, that, you know, have a vision, a clear vision, goals, whatever you want to achieve in your life, go for it. And doesn't matter what it takes. You know, you just have to willing to give everything, even if it means something, to give up everything in your life to achieve that goal. By achieving that goal, you will feel so good about yourself, and that means everything, you know. And then you can make your society better, your country, your people, and, you know, you can spread positivity all around the world.
Abbas Karimi, athlete and captain of the refugee Paralympic team. Good luck, team, in Tokyo. We'll be rooting for you. And that wraps up our show for today. Thanks for watching. See you next time.